The fog rolled low over the River Thames, thick and grey, wrapping London in its cold breath. In 1765, the city was already powerful, its docks crowded with ships, its streets alive with merchants, bankers, and gentlemen in fine coats. Britain was rising, becoming an empire built on trade, sugar, cotton, and unseen suffering. Most people walking those cobbled streets never thought about where their wealth came from. But far across the ocean, in the heat of West Africa, a boy named Kofi knew exactly what it cost. Kofi was 13 when his village was attacked. He had been chasing a goat near the edge of the forest when men with guns and fire appeared. Screams split the air. Homes burned. Mothers were dragged away from children. Fathers were beaten to the ground. Kofi ran, but not fast enough. Iron closed around his wrists. That was the last day he saw his mother. The Middle Passage eddy marched for weeks. Those who fell were left behind. When they reached the coast, Kofi saw the ship's massive wooden monsters floating on water. He had never seen the sea before. They packed him below deck with hundreds of others, chained shoulder to shoulder. There was barely air to breathe. Disease spread quickly. Some people cried for days. Others went silent. Bodies were thrown overboard like broken cargo. Kofi learned a new word from the sailors: property. That was what they called him now. England's invisible hence. Meanwhile, in Bristol, a young British clerk named Thomas Whitaker counted profits in a candlelit office. His father owned shares in 3 slave ships. Sugar plantations in Jamaica paid for their fine home. Cotton from the Caribbean funded Thomas's education. Thomas had never seen a slave. To him, it was all numbers on paper. Yet those numbers bought him polished shoes, warm meals, and dreams of becoming a respected gentleman. He told himself the trade was necessary. Everyone did. Life in chains. Kofi was sold on a plantation in Barbados. The sun was cruel. The work never ended. From dawn to dark, he cut sugarcane until his hands bled. Whips cracked through the air like thunder. Any sign of weakness was punished. Slaves were not allowed to learn to read. They were not allowed to speak their own languages. Families were broken apart at auctions without warning. Still, Kofi remembered his mother's stories. He whispered them at night to younger children, keeping their history alive in secret. That was his rebellion, a crack in the empire back in England. Something began to change. By the late 1700s, voices rose against slavery. Former slaves like Olaudah Equiano told their stories. Abolitionists such as William Wilberforce argued in Parliament. Ordinary people signed petitions. Women refused to buy slave-grown sugar. Thomas Whitaker attended one of Equiano's speeches out of curiosity. He did not expect to cry. For the first time, slavery had a face, a voice, a memory. Thomas went home that night and stared at his father's account books. He imagined chains behind every pound earned. He could no longer pretend. Freedom comes slowly in 1807. Britain officially banned the slave trade, but slavery itself continued. It wasn't until 1833 that the British Empire finally abolished slavery, though even then, formerly enslaved people were forced into apprenticeships, while slave owners were paid compensation. The victims received nothing. Nothing for their pain, nothing for their stolen lives. Kofi was old by then. His back was bent. His hands were scarred. Freedom arrived quietly, without ceremony. No land was given, no money, just permission to exist. He stood one evening by the ocean, the same ocean that had once carried him away, and let the wind touch his face. He was free, but he had lost everything. The Legacy today, grand buildings still stand in London, Liverpool, and Bristol, built with wealth from slavery. Streets carry the names of men who owned plantations. Museums display fine art paid for by human suffering. And descendants of people like Kofi still feel the echoes in inequality, in lost histories, and unanswered questions about identity. British slavery is not just a chapter in a textbook. It lives in bloodlines. It lives in architecture. It lives in memory. Final thought: that story of British slavery is not only about ships and laws and empires. It is about children taken from home, about hands that harvested wealth they never touched, and about human strength that survived what should have destroyed it. It reminds us that greatness built on suffering is never truly great, and that remembering is the first step toward healing. Subscribe to my channel, like, and follow. Thanks for watching.